My op-ed today over at at HartmannReport.com is titled, "Without the Infrastructure of Democracy, America will slide first into oligarchy and then into fascism." And, you know, what it's about essentially is that we have for way too many years been making the mistaken assumption, been operating the mistaken assumption that if we just elect good people to Congress, that everything will be fine. And as I note in the article, that's like saying, you know, hey, I've got the world's best surgeon, but she's going to operate in a hospital that doesn't have any running water and doesn't provide sterilization for instruments. Am I going to have a good outcome from my surgery? Probably not. It's not just the people. It's also the infrastructure around the people. And the infrastructure, there's three particularly important parts of American of our republic, of our Republican system, that are absolutely necessary for a functioning democracy. The first is elections that actually produce the result that the people who vote want. In other words, an election where when the majority of people vote for a particular party, that particular party ends up with the seat. We don't have this in many states. In Wisconsin, for example, 53% of the population of the state voted for Democrats. But that hasn't helped a whole lot. I mean, well, for example, in Wisconsin, their delegation of the U.S. House, again, keep in mind, more than half of all people in Wisconsin voted for a Democrat in the last election a year and a half ago. And yet, 6 out of their 8 members of the House of Representatives are Republican. 64 out of 99 seats in the state House are Republicans. And 22 out of 33 seats in the state Senate are Republicans. They actually call it the state assembly, not the House, but you get my point. So, number one, you need an election system that you can trust. Now, Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin have done basically the same thing that the Republicans in Wisconsin have. They've gerrymandered Hungary and Russia to the point that no matter who votes and how they vote and where they vote, Viktor Orban and Vladimir Putin are going to get elected over and over and over again. So that's number one. Number two, you need a free press. A press that is not owned by the same oligarchs who own the major political party. Now, that is the situation, not having a free press, but instead having a press owned by the oligarchs. That is the situation that exists right this moment in both Russia and Hungary. In both countries, the government essentially forced the sale of media properties to oligarchs friendly to the government. And in both countries, the government owns, a large public broadcasting sector, kind of the equivalent of our NPR and OPB, or NPR and CPB, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Here in Oregon, it's Oregon Public Broadcasting. But anyhow, the public broadcasting here in the United States is relatively independent. The public broadcasting in Russia and Hungary is entirely owned by the administrations, essentially, by the governments of Putin and Orban. And they're like Fox News. They sing the praises of these dictators 24/7. Now, we're moving in that direction here aggressively in the United States, creating a media infrastructure that is largely Republican. There are 1,500 right-wing radio stations in America right now. There's probably 2 or 3 dozen progressive radio stations in this country, commercial stations. There are several hundred right-wing religious nonprofit stations in the country right now. There's really only a couple of dozen Pacifica stations that are essentially viable, and most of them are in deep trouble financially. But you've got this huge right-wing infrastructure, and on television, it's Fox so-called News and Newsmax, and you've got all these right-wing networks. The right wing, the billionaires who own the right wing, are very well funded. They're very wealthy, and so they're making all this stuff happen. And then finally, the third thing that you need as part of your infrastructure to develop and maintain democracy is good public education. You need people graduating from high school and from college with an understanding of how civics works, of how government works, of what all these things mean and how they fit together, and what are the basic premises upon which your society is founded. And if you can graduate essentially uninformed people, or people who are well indoctrinated by the likes of Trump University or Liberty University or you know, your right-wing religious schools that in state after state after state are replacing public schools. If you can do that, then, you know, you can control the populace essentially and prepare everybody for fascism. So my point is that we need to be paying attention to these three things. We need to be paying attention to our public schools and our colleges and the way that they're being twisted. You see this hugely in Florida, for example, with the new school, the new university, new college. We need to be paying attention to our election systems, and we need to be paying attention to our media. And frankly, we're not doing much with any of them, but the Republicans sure are.